Good morning and welcome to the Innovators. Each week we're serving up real talk with badass women who are dishing out the truth. No fluff, no BS, just raw, honest stories and lessons to inspire and empower the next generation of trailblazing women. We're here to keep it real and pay it forward. I'm your humble host, Cynthia Nelson, three-time entrepreneur, investor, and advisor. It's a real pleasure today to have Susan Kilkenny, president of SK Projects, on the podcast. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, Cynthia. Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. I want to go, you had this crazy long history in the media business. I mean, luxury, digital, reinventing and rebirthing Maxim magazine, and then most recently Group Black, and now with your own thing. So tell me how this actually happened.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting ride, right? Like lots of turns. I think like really thinking about how I got started, I'm one of those people who always worked. Like I just loved working. I loved being in the mix. So I think, from a really early age, like I worked at the swim club, I worked at the ski shop. I was always a waitress. So I just really liked making money, but I really liked understanding like how businesses work. And I was also like at a young age kind of obsessed with design and magazines. And in college, I had a really great professor who really like opened my eyes to advertising. And I think just like, the media world and the advertising world, it sounded super sexy. It was really
Mhm.
interesting. And getting that exposure, once I graduated, I was like, okay, how do I get to New York and how do I get into media? So my first job was at a trade magazine company, Chilton Publishing. I worked on an engineering magazine, but I was there for just a short amount of time. And this publisher was going out on his own. He was the publisher of a jewelry trade magazine that was like legendary. And he was going out on his own to create a competitor. So he took like a small number of people. I think there were like 15 of us, and I was dying to go. So, like we worked from home. We found an office in Center City, Philadelphia. I ran production. I was like by far the youngest person there. I was probably the most tech savvy also.
Mhm.
And it was just a really great first real like work experience being in a startup, like trying things. And that kind of just led me to, I was running production and they asked me to move into sales. And at the time, like sales sounded kind of icky to me. Like I didn't necessarily want to be that person.
Yeah.
But I realized that I was just super passionate about what we were doing and really good at kind of like evangelizing,
Hmm.
what we were about.
Hmm.
So they moved me to New York. And once I got here, it was like, all bets are off. Like so
Right.
many interesting people, so many like places to go, things to do. So I was working at this jewelry trade magazine, like living on 47th Street in the jewelry district, like
Hmm.
living in 580, the like diamond building, which was like
Hmm.
entirely men. And I got a call from Women's Wear Daily. And back when I was at Chilton, Fairchild was also was like a sister company. So I
Yeah.
was like well aware of like Women's Wear Daily and W and of course Vogue and Elle and all the like the fashion magazines. And so they were looking to build their jewelry and watch business. So I got hired there to do that. Worked with like had an incredible boss that I learned a ton from, really built that business, like brought in, all the luxury brands, the Cartiers, the Tiffany's, David Yurman's, and then like the smaller like trade industry people. So it was
Hmm.
just a really great experience building a new business.
Hmm.
And then Vogue had reached out. The luxury seller was moving into a different role. And I had like all the relationships, and that was really interesting. I was probably like not as experienced as I should have been, but I
Hmm.
had the right relationships and I got in there and just, honestly, like working at Condé Nast was like getting an MBA
Yeah.
in like elite storytelling.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
everyone was on top of their game. I think it really helped me level up.
Hmm.
And I was running like a 8-figure business
Hmm.
with a lot of support.
Hmm.
So it was just a really interesting time. And that was awesome. I was like meeting different designers and artists, and I like really like working with creative people. So I had learned, I was also a big fan of Interview Magazine. I should mention, like in college, I was kind of
I love that
obsessed,
magazine. Oh my
right?
gosh, me too. Yeah.
And so that was like a really special, in my mind, like a really special kind of brand.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't even know who was involved in it except for like originally Andy Warhol.
Right,
So
right.
once I was in the Vogue world, like, the photographers, you're doing really big enterprise deals with brands and connecting all the dots. I like was a giant fan of multiple photographers. I've got like a wall full of, different photographers that I've worked with, but Fabian Baron at the time was taking over Interview Magazine, and I was like, how do I get there? So I like basically begged the new publisher, Alan Katz, for a job, and ended up really getting a sales role there. And it was a small, scrappy team. Like we punched way above our weight. We were just doing really cool programming, like focused on the art world, but bringing luxury into it. We had interesting relationships, so we did some cool things where, like, we launched the first magazine app for the iPad, and we
Mhm.
got iPads early, and so I could get like any meeting with any CEO on the planet. And we just did like really fun things. We had the greatest parties during Art
Oh,
Basel.
I
We
can
opened
imagine.
hotels,
Yeah.
restaurants. The art community was,
Mhm.
very integrated. It wasn't like super separate. Um, and from there, like it was all digital advertising. And
Right.
like, I just felt like I was negotiating CPMs all the time.
Yeah.
And one of my clients, Amelia, ran cultural programming for Andre Balazs. So I had all the brand relationships, and she knew all like the downtown cool kids. And we decided just to go out on our own. We wanted to like build a, we wanted to build like a platform for fashion videos, because the fashion brands were like developing their own, like videos as part of their communications.
Right.
And LVMH had just launched Nowness. So we went out on our own and did whatever people would pay us to do. So I was like repping, independent magazines, and we were hired by Yotel to do their cultural programming, opened that hotel. We worked for like IMG. We did a ton of programming at Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week. Some of our things got written up by the New York Times. We had like a lot of tech people involved, oddly, before like, tech was invading like our everyday lives.
Right.
And so it was just a really fun time. But a mentor of mine said to me, he's like, you need to check out this big data thing. And I was like, that sounds horrible. Like how creative is data? And so I actually did. And I found a company it's called Wealth Engine. They had this unique data set, and they were a market leader in the nonprofit space. And they were looking to move into the luxury retail space and financial services. And so I ended up going there and working with that team and really understanding from these like brilliant data scientists, like what that was all about. And then going to all of my existing clients that I sold advertising to and taking them like really valuable solutions that help them understand their customers. And so like getting into predictive analytics and like customer modeling and,
Mhm.
basically everything that it's just mission critical to being successful, like running an organization today. Got into crazy rooms, like just with this really interesting offering, because people were just starting to build out their CRMs.
Right.
And so that was great getting me into tech. It was my first exposure to like venture capital, to Silicon
Hmm.
Valley. I
Hmm.
was in San Jose a lot. I was like by far the only female in the
Hmm.
room most times. And I loved that. And I kind of had this like trend of like 3-year gigs,
Hmm.
because once something was up and running and like I did all the heavy lifting, I was like, okay, what's next?
Right.
And so the guys who had funded and started Seamless, I learned had licensed the Domino media brand from
Mm-hmm.
Condé Nast, which was like the shelter title that they had for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, being like big into design and also a massive Domino fan, Domino
Right.
had like this
Amazing.
cult following,
Oh,
right?
completely cult. Completely
There are
cult.
people who literally collect every issue. Like you can find them on eBay. It's
It's
insane.
it's like the new version of National Geographic where everybody used to
Yeah,
collect it, right?
totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
So that was really, so they were relaunching it as content and commerce. And so it was like positioned as the first content slash commerce um, media brand. And it was really interesting because we were like, there was so much tension there, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
I was building their digital infrastructure. And again, it was like really exciting working with the CTO on like the ad taxonomy and like literally building the ad placements on the site and then taking that to market, educating the sellers, like doing these deals. And so I was there and I was just like killing it, right? Like far exceeding revenue targets. And friends of mine had gone to Maxim. And, you know, it's this legacy media brands. They were hired as like the president and executive team under this new young owner of the brand, and they kept asking me to join them, and I was like, I don't know, like the subject matter doesn't really resonate with me.
Right.
They still have a magazine. Like I wasn't a fan of print any longer, really. And after like a lot of debate, I ended up taking the job. And it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made, oddly. So I spent 5 years there. It was kind of a shit show. But over time, we were able to like right size the company. I ended up running the company with the owner and Gilles Ben Simone, who was the editor, creative director, doing all the photo shoots. And I really was able to like figure out how to leverage all these assets that I had within reach
Hmm.
to like make this thing kind of work using what was happening in the culture. And so like leveraging technology, we built this cover girl contest that, you know, like minted money, was able to like bring on super talented people that helped me like reinvigorate the events. And so really like licensing became a really big business. Um, you know, I worked closely with Gilles and Guillaume, like the creative team, and you know, for the print magazine, it was a really hard sell, and I
Yeah.
was able to like find new ways, get super creative. I started working with tourism bureaus, and I'm like, okay, I have Gilles Ben Simone and a top model. So how do we like use this to create really good content that gets
Hmm.
seen, like, you know, like much wider distribution, but also like generate revenue.
Right.
And so I was dying to go to Israel. So I like just blindly pitched Israel tourism, became fast friends with them, ended up doing a deal, taking Kate Upton and Gilles and like a team to Israel to like shoot all over. We did the same thing in Mexico, shooting in like Jalisco and Mexico City and
Hmm.
like creating new products
Right.
to really just like make things happen. So, um, you know, Maxim was awesome because I really developed incredible relationships in like sports and entertainment. You know, really like a global platform. And, you know, what was super cool is at the end of the day, we turned this public company profitable and, you know, kind of played by like a whole new set of rules. So,
And you put different people on the cover too. Like you kind of changed the way that it looked in a lot of ways.
yeah, I mean, so that was actually the Sutter, the owner, you know, had this vision of like elevating the content. And so it had this luxury feel to it while it
Hmm.
still was provocative, like it
Hmm.
some in a
Hmm.
way in which like Gilles Ben Simon could deliver. So
Hmm.
I really started to love the package that we were designing. Like it was becoming super relevant. And to your point, like connecting it to culture.
Hmm.
So while it had like, you know, luxury autos and expensive watches and, you know, bourbons and whatever, it also had, you know, like the hottest rapper
Right.
and, you know,
Right. Very
different
different.
athletes. And that's what like having that asset to offer people all of a sudden made our events super cool. So I had this little model where it's like, okay, the cover model hosts a party. I work with Sony or Epic
Hmm.
and they have like a talent that's looking to perform.
Mhm.
And then we invite like this community that we've built, and it just became like this incredible thing. And I, was able, like during COVID when people weren't really shooting,
Right, right.
and having these relationships, I was able to put Sweetie on the cover.
Mhm.
And then, one of our Hot 100 issues, really lobbied to put Tiana Taylor on the cover, like
Mhm.
before she blew up, and it was just incredible. So it was a really fun experience. And I think, having been there for like 5 years, I had this idea that I would go out on my own. And I had done some projects with Bon and Bell, and we were talking, and I wanted, I was going to work with, I met so many interesting people at Maxim. So I
Sure,
had some
sure.
ideas of people that I was going to like work on projects with and put this like portfolio together I had in my head of like things I could work on. And Bonnet started telling me about the concept for Group Black.
Mhm.
So, long story short, like he introduced me to his co-founders, and I
Mhm.
was hired there as the first employee to really like build the infrastructure, create this collective of Black-owned media and
Mhm.
Black creators. And it was, I mean, they're killing it today. And
Yeah,
it was just a
completely.
really interesting time post George Floyd. Like all of
Right,
these
right,
companies had made pledges to support, diverse minority owned business, and there wasn't really any point solution for them.
right.
So we became that. We, like brought on all these different media, small Black owned media companies, and some were larger, but still like they didn't always have the like most advanced infrastructure. So we were
Right.
able to provide that, deploy millions of dollars to these businesses. I have like, lifelong friends from that experience. And
Sure.
it was just really, really exciting. And it kind of got me back to like my data roots, where like really understanding, you know, what the demographic of the country looks like and how
Mhm.
marketers need to connect to them like efficiently and effectively, was really eye opening, because working with, this contingency of, diverse voices, a
Right.
lot of marketers were just like, business as usual, like the message is the message.
Right.
And so having like back in college, like reading Marshall McLuhan's like the medium is message, like there was just
Mhm.
so much that was wrong. And I think today like marketers have gotten so much better really like leveraging data, but also being smart about how they're, connecting, what engagement looks like, how they're measuring their success. And um, Group Black was an incredible experience and super eye-opening. And after 2 years there, I was like, okay, I need to like go out on my own. I kind of felt, to be honest, a little bit like I was burning out.
Mhm.
And I knew that there were other things that I was like
You wanted to
curious
do.
about.
Yeah.
So,
But
um,
marketers, you mentioned something really interesting about, I think it's a big challenge though still, in the marketing space, connecting with creators and brands. There's been some great things happen, and there's been some really big mistakes that have happened. You know, what are the challenges they're facing now? I mean, AI is also obviously there everywhere we go, but what are you seeing? What are they telling you or asking you
yeah,
related to creators and brands?
so it's so interesting. Like for the past 10 years, I mean, in almost every recent role from like Domino to Maxim for sure, Group Black, like I worked with creators, and quite honestly, like Domino, we were launching that. We didn't necessarily have the site traffic that we needed, but you work with creators and all of a sudden,
There you go.
there's scale. So we were creating video series and doing all these things, but it was a very transactional experience, right? Like you worked with the creator to do whatever your agenda was,
Right.
accomplish your objective. And I feel like that's really short sighted. And today, and one of the things that I noticed when I was at Group Black, and this became like a trend, and we were going to build like a little business around it.
Hmm.
And it kind of like we lost our focus, so it didn't end up happening. And I see it happening in different spaces today, but we realized, or like what I learned is that a lot of these creators, while they're like social media pros and they can help drive, traffic and sales and, all the right KPIs, they have bigger dreams, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, and I feel like, the like three generations that are under 44 today, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
Gen Alpha, Gen Z, and millennials, like there's a lot of multi hyphenates. They
Yep.
don't necessarily just do one thing. And I hate generalizing like this, but there's data to back it up.
Hmm.
And so I think like really understanding what a creator is all about and like what they want to accomplish, which might go far beyond like posting on TikTok
Right.
or Instagram, and maybe not, like maybe that's the case. But I know firsthand, because we spent a lot of time at Group Black, like with this idea of building like a creator business, like make your mark, like
Hmm.
transcend
Hmm.
social.
Hmm.
And you see that today, right?
Hmm.
There's a number of people like Cobby Lame comes to mind because I worked with him, but he's got a series on Tubi.
Right.
Um, there's people like oh, her name's escaping me, Addison Rae,
Yep.
who like we featured her at Maxim, but now she's like
Yeah,
winning awards and signed by Columbia Records.
exactly.
So there's just a lot of that. And I feel like, that opportunity, if I was a brand, I would want to really like develop a win-win, like longer term relationship and understand where this person's headed as like a collaborative partner as opposed to just, like an influencer.
Like a one-off, long-term strategy versus a one-off.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
Uh,
you see a lot more of that.
I think they're changing because there's so much opportunity, right? Technology's not holding them back. Nothing's holding them back. If they want to explore it, they can. They can dip their toes in at any time, figure out if it's what they want. And when they have passion about something, that's where if you can harness that passion and grow with them over time, I think that's where the magic actually can happen for a brand and for them as well, because a brand can help them along the way.
Well, so that's my point. I feel like it's got to be like a win-win scenario
Right,
where
right,
maybe like traditionally, there was like the outcome was like the brand wins in some way, shape, or form.
right.
And now,
Sales, yeah,
yeah.
whatever it happens to be. But now it's more of asking the questions of what does it look like for them to win?
Yeah. And I also think that for, you know, influencer marketing is like mainstream marketing now. And
Yes.
so in order for it to work, it needs to like be real and feel organic. And so
Yep.
that's just really like happens when you get to know somebody versus like deliver. There was a point in time where sometimes the brand didn't even talk to the
Yeah,
talent,
yeah, many
and it was just
times.
like
Yeah.
briefs being sent back and forth. And
Right.
I've been guilty of that, but like I didn't think of it at the time.
Yeah,
So
sure, sure. It definitely the world is changing. Um, you've had such a varied career in, media, marketing, entertainment, creators. What's the most important piece of advice you've been given?
yeah, I would listen to your all the podcasts that you did, and such awesome advice. And so I was really kind of like racking my brain, and like the thing that kept surfacing was, and I can't remember who said it to me, but it was really about so there's this thing that I always have in my head that's everyone puts their pants on the same way, like
Right,
one leg at a time.
right.
And I don't know, I just kind of like have always approached like everyone equally, no matter like what your title is or like where you
Hmm.
come from, or that's just kind of been like an operating principle. I think it was like my mother or my grandmother, but anyway, I don't know. And growing up in Philly, I feel like that was just how you like moved through the world. And then the other thing that came to mind or that comes to mind is my one of my former bosses said to me, "You can't fall off the floor." And I was like, "What?" And I realized like when you're
That's a great one.
building,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
there's nowhere to go but up.
Yep,
So
yep.
I found myself in that scenario a lot, which really helped like unlock like decision making, like take the risk, like what do you have to lose?
Right. Those
So
are great pieces of advice for sure. Everybody's the same and you can't fall off the floor. I love it. What advice, however, would you give your 25-year-old self if you were to look back?
it's so funny. I heard someone say this morning on like the news that was on in the background, exercise and moisturize. Um, but seriously, like, you know, well, the thing where I am right now that I wish I would have known a long time ago was how to be present.
Mhm.
And when I left Group Black, a person who I do some work with, Grant Haas, who's been like an incredible like partner and resource and advisor and I guess mentor type. Um, he's like, you need to slow your brain down a little bit. And so he connected me to people that were starting this company called Still Life. And I went through this incubator with them
Mhm.
where I learned through this incredible like guru Jim who like really teaches you how to like focus, how to like really turn everything off and how to be present. So, you
Mhm.
know, through breathing and meditation. And I've always been like, I've always worked out. Like, I've always been about like the cardio workout my
Mhm.
whole life. And so to like have this new experience and then see like how game changing it is to actually be present and like move through the world with this like kind of like different vibe is just a very interesting experience. And there's certain people that know me really well that are like, wow,
Mhm.
like your energy is just different. And I'm not like a super woo woo person, but it's been really, really eye opening. And I wish I would have known to like,
Add the tools. How do we,
yes, yeah.
right?
And I think like along the way, different people. I mean, I can remember one person who was like, "Oh, you should meditate," like 10 years ago, and I was like, "Okay."
Yeah, you're like, no,
Right.
like
Like
not
I don't
happening.
have time for that. So, I think that that's one thing. And then the other thing I would say, trust your gut, right? Like
Hmm.
that's one of the things. I think I did an okay job of that. And I still struggle with that a little bit, but you kind of know innately, like if you get that ick factor about something,
You know
or if
it's
you just
bad.
totally connect with someone,
Yeah,
So there's a lot of signaling that's happening every
yeah,
day, like
yeah.
your, mind, body, and really kind of trusting that, I think is something that I wish I would have paid more attention to over the years.
I think those are great learned experiences also, right? But when if you can learn them when you're younger, man, they're super advantageous.
Yeah. And I feel like when you're younger, people tell you these things, but like it doesn't
It doesn't
resonate.
yeah, no,
So
it
I
does.
wish that there was a way to like really make, these like important tools or skills or whatever, really bring the value to life. And I'm sure there are ways today, but
Definitely for the next generation or the generation coming for sure.
right.
Susan, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. How can people get a hold of you if they want to work with you?
So email is probably the best way. And my email is Susan at skpc.co. So it's SK Projects and Collaborations. I just shortened it. Um, .co or LinkedIn. Honestly, like LinkedIn's a great place too.
Awesome. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Cynthia. This is awesome. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.